Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another installment of The Way It Is. I am your host, Luca with Remax Service First Realty, and I am exceptionally pleased to have as my guest today Pierre Klein, who is the operations manager for Home Base Kingston, an organization that essentially deals with the needs and trying to house those that obviously needed homelessness as well. So, Pierre, welcome.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure for you to be here. It's obviously, given my tenure in real estate, homelessness is always something that I'm a Kingstonian, and it's something that I've always grappled with in terms of because there's a disconnect, I think, and maybe we'll start with that in terms of. I know there's probably a public perception in terms surrounding homelessness and how that even comes to be. So I don't know, maybe offer some insights into just how that comes to happen, I guess, and in Kingston, where that comes from. So.
Well, it happens predominantly starting at a very young age overall. The city did a study of those in the encampment at Bell Park and found that 50% of adult homelessness individuals had experienced homelessness as youth. So that's a big indicator as to where at least 50% of that stuff starts. And it can be for a whole host of reasons. It can be for mental health and addiction reasons. It can be falling behind on your mortgage payments or falling behind on your rent payments because all of a sudden you've been laid off or unemployed and can't find work, or you have an illness. It can be, it can be as simple as, your house burning down and not having insurance. It can be all kinds of reasons, and it affects people from all economic backgrounds, actually. And what we fail to do as a society is catch it before it happens or as it happens. And so home-based housing looks first to diversion of those that come to us for help, and which means that, is there a way we can keep them in the housing they're in? Does it mean that we have to try and help pay a couple months' back rent, and help them budget and try and keep them in the housing that they have? That's the first part. If you can keep them where they are, that's the best. Mm-hmm. Then and provide the supports they need necessarily to maintain and keep that housing. Then there are the problems with our health system. There isn't enough resourcing right now and taking of responsibility for the significant level of addiction and mental health issues that people are dealing with. So those areas aren't being funded enough, or they're, not saying that our health system isn't doing a great job, but there are significant gaps in service levels there. And then there are individuals that don't want help.
Right.
That prefer to be on their own for whatever reason, So, it's an extremely complex and difficult question to even answer.
Right. Right.
One of the difficulties in Kingston, and actually it's a difficulty across the country, is the opioid crisis that we're facing. We have now seen with fentanyl a dramatic increase in those individuals who can't function on their own. Mm-hmm. And that crisis has created a great deal of what I would call longer-term housing needs. Right. And it's extremely difficult. This is not an easy clientele base,
right.
To service. I mean, you're dealing with, our staff deal sometimes with significant violence. Individuals that are either high or just completely out of it, or have mental health issues, and are get accused of stealing something when the thing didn't exist in the first. It's an extremely difficult portfolio.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess I'll backtrack because I didn't mean to jump. Obviously, it's a big issue, and we could go on probably for an entire year of podcasts trying to discuss all of the nuances and variables that are involved. But I'm going to take a step back and apologetically so, because what's your background then? Are you a Kingstonian? We don't know each other, so and I know Ben sourced this out, and so tell us about yourself and how you came to be operations manager of Home Base Kingston.
Well, well, I was first elected as a trustee with the Peel Board of Education at the age of 23 up in Peel.
Wow.
And served 2 terms there, involved in politics, and then became a regional councillor and chair of the housing committee for the region of Peel. And so youth issues and housing issues have always been, an area of extreme interest for me, especially dealing with those who can't support themselves or are in need of assistance. Was on the Peel Living and Peel CAS board of directors. And these are very large operations with, $1 billion budgets and, capital as well as operating. And from there, I have been, done some private sector development myself. I have had a variety of careers in terms of, finance and operations, banking.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm kind of a jack of all trades and perhaps not a master of all, but my portfolio allows me to be a jack of all trades, if you will. I went to school for some law, and so I have a background of a variety of experiences. So how did I come to Kingston? I actually originally moved to when I left politics. Shortly thereafter, moved to Prince Edward County with my spouse, and we adopted a number of kids. 4 boys, actually. And living life out there was pretty simple and pretty easy, and kind of got bored. So I ended up being offered a job. I just had a discussion with the executive director about what the layout of Kingston is and how can I make a difference in the community here. And ended up being offered a job by the executive director and the board of directors to do some substantial change management and move Home Base forward in terms of a number of issues, both dealing with development and increasing supply, changing the kind of some of the direction of the organization, and so my portfolio is everything from legals to building and maintenance, a number of projects that we're currently involved with, which I can go into greater depth on. But it's I have a wide variety of jobs and tasks to do at Home Base.
Right. And so how long have you been doing this now? How long have you been in your position?
I think it's 2.5 years or 3 years now.
Okay. So
time has just kind of gone.
Yes,
I live in Kingston now. We bought a house, and we're just trying to finish up the renovations on it. And so we're in the Henderson community. Very lovely area.
Yeah. No, that's where I live. It is a lovely area. Absolutely. Yeah. Good. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm always. It must be, I think it's just timing, and I've always asked guests sometimes to send me a bio. In this particular case, that was my mistake. I just either ran out of time or didn't do it, so I apologize for that.
No problem.
Now, my podcast, you heard when we started this, I think this is episode 35, so it started at the onset of the pandemic and during the pandemic, and most, if not all, of the episodes have been obviously centered around the pandemic and its effects on real estate in our community and everything in between. So obviously, the pandemic has had an effect on homelessness and the needs of the community. So maybe give us a snapshot of what was happening before, how the pandemic has changed that, and what the trends are maybe coming out of this now.
Well, for example, we operate Lily's Place, which is a family shelter. And we also operate In From the Cold, which is a single adult shelter. The adult shelter had capacity for 35 individuals. We were cut down back to 13 during the pandemic to try and provide the sufficient distancing between individuals. And we partitioned off common rooms and, had to spend a lot of money on redoing the entire kitchen area so that there were barriers so that nobody could touch areas or cough or whatever else, right? And then of course all the pandemic expenses in regards to PPE and that sort of thing, heightened cleaning. So we've had to hire more staff, all of that sort of thing. So in the short term. In the beginning of the crisis, we had to close down prematurely. We were supposed to go for another, I think, 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. What was the, In From the Cold kind of situation down near the downtown to deal with emergency cold issues to keep people off the streets. Because of the pandemic, we had to close it down because people were quite frankly side by side coughing and being ill from normal stuff, let alone what you would know what would end up with COVID. So that was unfortunate that we had to do that in that situation to protect both staff and the clientele, if you will.
So just to interrupt you for a moment there, what ended up happening to those that were essentially displaced then because of those cutbacks and just left to their own devices then essentially?
Unfortunately, we couldn't do anything. It was we had been in discussions with the city, and things were where they are. We can't. We had limited budgets that we were allocated. We're government funded predominantly. So we don't have the resources to, put a whole football field of units together. I mean, that's the responsibility of government, municipal government and otherwise. Yeah. We certainly lend our expertise and we pitch in whenever we can. But at the same time, having said that, we had been asking for, and finally were able to utilize Fairfield East, which was a retirement home. Yes. And so we were able to move our shelter individuals there and increase our capacity as part of this response. And that facility, had a huge number of rooms, and I can't remember. So the rooms had their own washrooms. We put televisions in all the rooms. Everybody had their own private room. There was no sharing of spaces other than a scheduled eating schedule to make sure that people had, were fed. The only good thing that came out of COVID was a proof of concept. A year earlier, our board of directors on my, my part of my direction, if you will, made a policy change, and that we would no longer look at shelters as a mechanism to house people, that we would be looking at individualized units, small bachelorette type of units, a little kitchenette, their own private washroom, and their own, bed space and a door that they can lock. That goes to the heart of of not only privacy, but security of the person and their possessions. So you can imagine being in a congregate living situation where you're sleeping in bunk beds beside people. How do you get a good night's sleep? If you can't get a good night's sleep, what's your mood the next day? If you're worried about things being stolen, mental health, somebody else screaming or somebody else coughing or snoring, whatever the issue is, right? So this gave us an opportunity to prove the concept that we had. And that opportunity delivered for us 71 individuals we were able to stabilize and then house.
Wow.
Which was an amazing record in terms of the short period of time that we were able to operate that facility. It just proved our concept. And of course, it's part of the concept for our youth, Kingston Youth Services Hub that we're building, and the residential portion of it.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that a little later on because I was on the site and I certainly availed myself of all the initiatives that are ongoing and the services that you offer, and it's tremendous. So I guess the immediate question is then, have numbers gone up? I mean, is there a number? Do you have an actual number of how many homeless there are in the city of Kingston? Is it something you can actually physically track? Does it get tracked?
Well, so there is a track. The United Way participates and actually is the coordinating agency in which a number of us participate on a single day to do account. So we send people out into the world of Kingston, looking everywhere and counting. And that comes up with a number. I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me. Right. But the bottom line is, it's never going to count everybody.
Right.
Because there are people that are what we say is couch surfing, predominantly youth, by the way, do a lot of couch surfing. So they impose on friends and their families and, for a week here or a couple of days here, and then they're on the street for a couple of days. What I can say is that we feel that there is a demand beyond 65 for youth, for individual units and apartments. And that, I can tell you that the city just recently reported that in their calculations, Lily's Place Family Shelter was at 113% capacity. We were turning away families because we had no ability to house them. And quite frankly, I'm not quite sure whether today they're still there, but we have a family of 7, a large family, mom, dad, 5 kids. They've been in our shelter for 6 months or more. Why? Because we can't find housing for them.
Right.
There is a significant affordable housing crisis in this city. Absolutely. Not for anybody that has, just a working income. It's crazy. You get politicians, and I was one of them, past, they'll say, oh, well, you got the vacancy rate at 3%, and therefore it's, that's a healthy balance in the marketplace, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's not true.
Yeah.
What you need to look at is the affordability of the rents. And I believe last year the rents went up 7%.
Yeah.
Right?
They're pretty high. So, Kingston has some of the highest rents in the region, let alone in the province, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
And the biggest complication and we've been very vocal about this, is that our post-secondary education institution, which provide a great deal of economic impact on this community, they're extremely positive asset to Kingston, but they have fallen down on their social responsibility in terms of housing for students. And we're faced with, rents by private sector landlords of 600, 700, 800,000 and 50 I've seen per bedroom.
Yeah.
So you figure that out in a 4-bedroom house.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, my mortgage, or I can say to you this, A $500,000 mortgage is cheaper than renting a 4-bedroom house
Yeah.
in this city.
I run a property management company. I know exactly what you're describing.
There you go. There you go.
So
You're
no,
the beneficiary of the situation.
Yeah, I know exactly.
And then just recently, Queens announced that it can't house 360 first year students. Do you know what 360 students equals 94 bedroom houses?
Yeah.
Or 180 2-bedroom apartments. Yeah. Well, what do you think that's going to do to the prices and availability for anybody to rent anything?
Yeah.
So we encourage everybody to call us. Do not leave your unit. Just don't. Yeah. Let us try and help you save, where you're living, because there's nothing there for you afterwards. So
have you seen an exacerbation? Obviously, the pandemic has exacerbated all these.
Yes, in the area of it's twofold. One is that rents are the major factor, but the other factor is, to a degree, is the inability to house people in congregate living situations, right? Mm-hmm. And it's certainly not our desire to perpetuate that. We're a housing first operation. In other words, you come into our shelter is as low barrier as you possibly can be, but at the same time, we have one barrier. You have to be willing to go and find housing with us, and we'll help you.
Right.
Because that's our objective. That's our mandate, actually, from the city. Our funding is predicated on us getting people to a point that we can get them housing. But if you don't want housing, we're not. Then you go down the street to the other center. Right. But so I mean that's our objective. So the pandemic has exacerbated things. We've been lucky for a while to have agreements to house people in hotels and motels and that sort of thing. But that's not sustainable either.
Right.
We have a crisis, and Home Base has saw the crisis before the pandemic. And so we have been proposing 3 projects to help both in adults, single adults, families, and in the area of youth homelessness.
Right, and I think the if I'm not mistaken, the largest of that initiative is 44 Albert, correct?
Yes, we're very privileged that we were able to acquire the property at a significant discount from its value, with an in-kind contribution of $1.75 million from the congregation of Princess Street United Church. We are extremely grateful for this opportunity. We have housed our One Roof operation, which is an operation that's a community initiative with Home Base being the lead agency, where we have 27 other agencies that service youth, provide services in the drop-in center, counseling, education, addiction, you name it, anything that youth need that are homeless. So they can come in, they can become comfortable. Our staff, try and create relationships with these homeless youth and get them all the supports that they need. Having said that, we don't have enough youth housing in our portfolio, let alone across the city. We have 30 beds, if you will, or 30, units from bachelors to, some houses. And so this big need that we have is to upfront fund and solve youth homelessness so that we can cut adult homelessness in half. That's the biggest impact we could do. Right. And so what we're looking at is a very holistic approach to youth homelessness, in that we're looking at building 48 units at that site of residential. They're small. They're 200 square feet. They're bachelor units. They have a little kitchenette. They have their own washroom. Again, security of persons, security of their...
essentially a dorm room is what you're talking about.
a dorm room with, they have a laundry facility on the floor and that sort of thing. But what's important is that we have 1 to 10 in a ratio of staff to those residents that do case management. That case management is all about getting them the skill sets that they lack, or the supports and resources they lack, whether it's mental health, whether it's physical, elements, whether it's how to cook a meal, how to make a bed, how to do your laundry. You got to remember, I have to say I was extremely privileged. I had a stay-at-home mom who taught me all these things.
Yeah.
I had parents that taught me the value of money, that taught me how to budget, taught me how to, do all kinds of things. When you're 16 years old and you find yourself on the street for whatever reason you're on the street, where's the guidance? There's nobody there. So we have to step in to ensure they get all of that without being parental to them, but provide them with all the parental education that a parent would normally have bestowed on that child or that youth.
Yeah. And that was a question I was going to lead to, is that, you have the facilities, people come in, and you even discuss that family of 7, but, what's the transition rate, I guess, from those that come in to use the services and to those that finally are able to get back on their feet and get back into functioning in the community, I guess, or get back to having a job, or get back.
We're talking about what's called a turnover rate in inventory, right? Basically, okay. I'm a business guy, so that's there isn't something hard and fast. But what we have found is in the family section, for example, much longer stays, and that's as a result of the lack of the ability of finding necessary housing that actually is both sustainable. We could put them in houses tomorrow.
Right.
But we know that somebody that only can afford $1,500 can't afford $4,000 a month.
Right.
And so why would we set them up for failure? Right. So we need to be able to find them places in which they can, sustain their housing.
And I'll say
any failures.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this out loud, and it's unfortunate, but it's a bias and a stigma that exists in that world, in the property management world, in the landlord world, in the private sector. That we get a lot of people get a lot of applications, and when it says the income is from ODSP or whatever, flags go up, and people sadly get.
Which I would like to remind the public is illegal.
100%. No. I'm not saying exactly. Listen, we'll be very frank here. Absolutely. Biases exist everywhere. And
sure they do. But but we do things like we work with private landlords as well. We go out and we have Jeff who works very digital, very hard for us to. Find and work with landlords, private sector landlords. So we will enter into, for example, agreements to cover damages. Mm-hmm. It's not like we try and reduce risk for the private sector as well, if that's perceived to be a risk. So we try and do a lot to make sure that the private sector, participates in helping us find housing.
Well, right, and we also know, Pierre, that the sad reality is there are those that definitely need it, use it for what it's intended, and get back on track, and then there's those that simply just advantage themselves of the situations and the processes, or
fall down again. Right.
Or fall down again. Fair enough.
And that's why we do both. We do transitional and supportive housing. So we have 96 units of supportive housing for adults. And the reason that they're supportive housing is because they can't sustain housing on their own. So we're there with, again, a ratio of 1 to 10 case managers that work with these individuals to ensure that they can continue to meet, the basic living conditions that they need. There isn't a solution that says everybody will be independent.
Right.
right? Because that's just not the reality. There are
No.
individuals that continue to need support.
Well, and that speaks to your opening comments about all the other layers in terms of mental illness, the supports for that, the addiction support, it's a complicated chain, and there's no one fix. I greatly understand that, and it's not simply a
But
function of
but
all of a
there
sudden
is
if you had.
yeah
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
there is a fix. It's not the perfect fix. It's not the only fix, but there is a fix. And that is to significantly resource youth who become homelessness, because over a couple of decades, you will have a major impact on adult homelessness.
Yeah.
So we need to resource up front, right? And
Yeah.
that's why our project, although it's coming in approximately $240,000 a unit for the residential, but the rest of the building that provides classroom spaces, the support staff, besides all the municipal requirements for storage and bike storage and all that sort of thing, is a lot more expensive than if you just built yourself a apartment building.
You're right.
But the bottom line here is, if you don't have all the program spaces and you don't have the resourcing to support those youth, to give them the skill sets, you are never going to have an impact on adult homelessness.
Yeah. And I appreciate you raising that point, because I'm pretty sure I know myself and many others probably wouldn't have appreciated that link, that causal link between youth homelessness and then obviously the flow through into adult homelessness.
Absolutely.
A couple more questions. I don't want to
Sure.
keep you here forever, and we could probably have this conversation for a long time. But funding, we touched on it. Primarily government funding. What obviously there's layers: federal, provincial, and municipal. What's the breakdown, and what other than private donations? Where do you get it? Where are you getting your funding from, and how does that look?
Well, so there are a number of areas. Right now, we've already received $2.3 million from the province of Ontario for this project, for the youth homelessness initiative. We have a portion of the building is actually linked to what we will propose as a youth cultural center, which is part of the original church. Some of the infrastructure for it is actually in the new build. So we have some money from the federal government and the provincial government infrastructure money for that. That's $1.8 million. And then we have a significant donations that have been provided that we anticipate will be about $3 million. Then there's a whole host of other, grants that are available to do things like accessibility grants, and there's TWII we'll be applying for, and they're all small kind of things, but they all add up, if you will. But predominantly, it's about $4 million that, or $3 million that we, as an organization, have to come up with. We are looking at what's called the Rapid Housing Initiative, the second wave of it. It comes out here in August. We'll be asking the federal government for $11.5 million for that. And we anticipate that we will be asking the city of Kingston for a contribution somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 million. And that is to support the building that is necessary to support the youth in the residential units.
Right.
Like I said, it's not an inexpensive building. People will say, well, I can build something, per square foot the same, but I can provide you with more units or whatever. But this isn't the same.
Right.
We're not talking about a seniors apartment building that's 3 stories that doesn't need fire suppression systems.
Right.
We don't, these are units that all have kitchens and bathrooms and 200 square feet. Well, you've got a 600 square foot 1-bedroom apartment for a senior, has 1 bathroom, right?
Yeah.
And it has a kitchen.
Yeah.
Well, we have 3 bedrooms,
Yes.
3 kitchens, and 3 washrooms. It's a heck of a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
As well as all the program space. You need to have, for example, an exercise room where you can do physical health impacts mental health significantly. And I can't get people, for some reason, there's somehow a lost connection to that one. But
Yeah.
people need to understand we need to have programs that provide physical health that helps mental health, right?
Agreed.
Everything
Agreed.
from the simple depression to, just getting some fresh air, for God's sakes. There's
Yeah.
just a whole host of things. And then we need the staffing rooms, interview rooms, consulting rooms, intake, we need a professional kitchen. And that's to teach, it's a teaching kitchen. It's also for social enterprise. For our youth building, the holistic view of this is every youth is going to be asked to participate in an area of interest in the building. If you've got an area of interest as simple as cleaning and want to be a janitor or do that sort of thing, you will be matched with our staff. You will be given, or you even be even paid once you get some skill sets and some training. Event management at the cultural center. You want to learn how to cook. You want to be a chef, whether it's short order cook or something else. That's going to be there. Everyone is going to be integrated into participating in how the buildings function to provide job skill sets that they can later use to become independent and productive members of society. You have to look at this holistically.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. So what's the timeline then? Where's construction at now? What's the proposed?
Well, we're continuing to waiting for a permit to do a number of things that are pre-construction. We have to remove the manse on the property and put in servicing where the manse stands now. We have to put city services into the site from that location. We have some reinforcement of the roof of the church necessary because new snow loads of the new residential building would create, and we need to make sure that the roof doesn't collapse on the church, that it'll be now the cultural center. So in terms of timing, we want to start that work in August. It'll all depend on when we can get our permits in place, which is always an interesting, lengthy process. And then once we have when we can start doing that, so we'd be looking at a lot of prep work in the fall. It is my hope that we will be able to do some demolition in the late winter to early winter. Early winter to late winter, and that we can actually start doing foundations and building the structure come the spring, so that we're hoping we can be open and operational, sometime in the fall of 2022.
Right. Okay.
And that's a very quick timeline. But we've been investigating a number of very interesting modular component design. The first two stories of our project are concrete, and then the residential is either stick or different types of building opportunities that we have.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, Pierre, it's been great to have you here, and I know we only scratched the surface of this, and I.
Oh yeah, we could talk forever.
and I just after meeting you and having this brief conversation, I know you're impassioned. I get that, and I'm appreciative of that, because obviously that's what this initiative needs. That's what this cause needs, and I'm encouraged by that. So I want to thank you very much. Tell us how people can donate. Is there something you want to finish with?
Sure. If people want to go to build484.ca, BUILD 484.ca, they can go on. They can see a brief description of the entire project, and there's an ability to link to it to make a donation. Ideally, we're hoping that we can get people to donate. I think it's $89.33 a month. Which basically provides us with $1,000 a year. And by doing so, you get your it's charitable tax receipt. You get a tax credit for that. Yes, and by getting thousands of people to do that, we will be able to raise a great deal of money to not only provide programming but actually finish the build of this very needed project in Kingston.
I'm going to go on record as saying this today. You got your first realtor that's going to contribute. Maybe there's others, but I'm going to go ahead and make that donation ASAP, and I'm going to encourage all my colleagues in the real estate industry to do the same. Because if it's us that's availing ourselves of especially this market, the pandemic's helped real estate. It's the best thing that ever happened to real estate in my 33 years of practicing this craft. We can't forget about those that the pandemic is leaving behind. So
I appreciate that, Luca. Thank you very much. That's very gracious and
my pleasure. We'll post the link on our website, and I'm greatly appreciative of your time. I know you got probably a busy docket. So good luck, all the best, Godspeed, and I'm sure I'd like to catch up maybe after 2022 if I'm still doing this and see where we're at after that. That would be great.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.